he performed in between the lines just nonstop. Like when the lights went on, he just loved the competition.
Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers from The Athletic. Patrick, after that exciting no-hitter from Wednesday night, we have to bring it all down to talk about injury news and the Cubs kind of blowing a series against the Pirates, losing their ace to the IL with elbow inflammation, right? Is that what they're calling it, Patrick?
They called it tendonitis.
Tendonitis.
Steele had described it as inflammation in terms of what the medical staff or doctor had communicated to him. So at least there's Thursday's off day here to let that no-hitter just breathe for a little bit. The season has had such an extreme back and forth nature. If the Cubs had played 24 hours later, I had a feeling there'd be another gut punch coming, just the way this has gone. But Steele would have been kind of like the story yesterday, but Shota kind of moved him off the front page, and Steele still has symptoms. He did not play catch on Wednesday. That was sort of the plan. The idea was maybe he'll throw and see where they're at. He was still feeling it, so they didn't even bother with playing catch here. So as Counsell said, these next 10 days will be important. If Steele's healthy, he will pitch. That is what Counsell expressed to us. I guess things could always change, but I do think it's important for him to get back on the mound this year and finish the season. But obviously, when you're looking at a 15-day IL sit that's backdated towards the beginning of September, that's a significant chunk of the remaining schedule that's just wiped out for him, and we don't really know what sort of the state of the team that he'll be returning to, whenever that is.
Right. And this doesn't sound serious as far as his long-term health. The thing is, when they talk about, they're hoping it's a minimum stint, they hoped a lot of these guys were minimum stints that linger
I think
for a long time.
We shouldn't gloss over them saying, hey, this is good news. It's no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not the worst possible news, but it's not good news. And that, I think, just whenever we tweet, I feel like injury updates on social media, there's usually some immediate blowback to that, because you can definitely sense the fans' frustration. I'm sure there's some within the organization as well.
Yeah, I mean, Hayden Wisniewski still isn't back. That was supposed to be a short stint. Jordan Wicks had 2 IL stints. Ben Brown is shut down for the season. It seems like these things, all these guys were supposed to be back much quicker than they were. There's probably a few other injuries that I'm missing, but this has happened with Steele before. He last year he was shut down and he missed the minimum. It was forearm tightness last year. This year is obviously a little different. We'll see. I don't want to assume that he's done for the season when they tell us he's not. But I think Counsell kind of nailed it as far as these next 10 days are important. Yeah, he needs to throw without pain in the next couple days to feel good that it's going to be a minimum stay. And if it's not a minimum stay, then you're talking about the season possibly being lost, which may not. I think you you summed it up right there. We'll see where they are if and when he comes back. Is it even relevant, or is it just getting a couple starts in to kind of wrap the season up, or is it hey, you're fine, but we don't need to push this right now. Let's shut down the season type situation for you.
Yeah, I mean, the clock is sort of working against them here. You mentioned Hayden Wisniewski. Counsell said that Wisniewski is about to begin a rehab stint with AAA Iowa. There is not enough time for him to stretch out as a starter, so they're just going to try and get him up and running here and available to be an out-getter, as the manager would say. They do have 5 starters. Obviously, Shota has been brilliant. Wicks is back. Hendricks has been obviously up and down this year. Assad and obviously Tyone has been so consistent this year. But if Steele had finished this season healthy, I think we would have very much been wondering about a long-term extension for Justin Steele, even though he is under club control for multiple seasons. I think he's been that good. He's left-handed. His age complicates things a little bit, and just how much time he has to get before free agency. There is not really a sense of urgency from the Cubs side, but I do think he's someone you'd like to reward. He's someone who's been extremely consistent, both in his demeanor and his performance. And like you said, this isn't, when you hear elbow or he had like a forearm thing, I think it was last year, you hear those terms and a pitcher who's that good, you immediately start wondering about those worst case scenarios. We don't think that is this, but still, it is an arm injury for a pitcher who's performed at such a high level. And, I think that's what we've learned about pitching, right? It's always a knock on wood situation. You can never have enough of it. And this is kind of how the game works, right? Of like, just when you think like things are in order. I mean, when you were leaving DC off that great road trip, like this is not exactly the series against the Pirates I think anyone envisioned, but like you never know what's going to happen when you show up to the ballpark each day.
Right. And when you talk about a possible Steele extension, if he's healthy, I think it makes sense for both sides. Like he's 3 seasons after this one, he's under control for 3 more seasons. He's just not going to hit free agency at a point in time where he can say like he's making bank, right? And you can't assume what the next 3 seasons hold for him. Buying out the rest of his ARB years and kind of figuring out a way, tacking on a year or 2 could make sense for both sides in this situation. I guess you would put that on hold to see like how the next couple of weeks go as far as if he can get back. That's probably the biggest thing, right? As far as him returning, like it would make sense for him to say like, hey, look, here's 2 outings of 6+ innings or whatever. I'm good to go. Let's talk extension in the winter type thing. Patrick, they also put Jorge Lopez on the IL. I think that's significant, obviously, for how well he's pitched. The fact that they barely needed him during that road trip also says something to me, in that like maybe they have some actual depth in this bullpen. It's the bullpen wasn't needed as much. The offense kind of carried the load, and you kind of need that over stretches of the season. I think we touched on it in the no hitter podcast, but Nate Pearson stepping up is big. I think the other guy that needs to step up and has looked good since he's been called back up is Keegan Thompson. We've seen Keegan Thompson pitch really well before. 2 years ago, I believe it was now. He's been solid this year. And when he's healthy, if he can pitch regularly, he's a good reliever. Those are the 2 guys I think you look at and say, with Porter Hodge, with Drew Smiley, with who's the other high leverage guy that I'm now blanking on, Tyson Miller, who has looked shaky and is going through it right now as far as his reliability, and that's what relievers are. So you can't expect perfection from these guys, but I think those are the names you need to kind of look at to kind of stabilize this bullpen going forward. It's funny. There's two arms in the Yankees bullpen: Scott Efros and Mark Leiter
Light
Jr.
show, yeah.
Yeah, that Cubs fans are obviously familiar with. Efros just came back. He hasn't pitched well. Leiter has not pitched well as a Yankee. So this Yankees series will be interesting. But it's not like they're some powerhouse right now that's just like going out there dominating the competition. I believe they're under 500 in their last like 80 something games. Their offense is dominant because they have arguably the two best offensive players, not named Shohei Ohtani, in baseball on their team. When you have those two types of superstars, it's hard to like go in an offensive slump for an extended period of time. But they're not this. I know they're the Yankees, and I know they're going to make the playoffs, and they're better record and better team right now than the Cubs. I just don't know if you should assume anything when it comes to like, oh, the Cubs can't win this series. They're just not like the pit. I will say this. It seems like everybody's getting healthy as they come face the Cubs because they're getting two starters back that will pitch against the Cubs. We'll see how good those starters pitch, and Luis Heel and Clark Schmidt. But they got Heel, Schmidt, and Cole going against them. So it won't be easy, but I think this is a winnable series, and they kind of have to win, if not sweep. I don't know what the plan is for Hendricks, if he's going to start against the Dodgers. That'll be interesting to see. Do they go Shota on regular rest? Like they have options, right? But I don't know what Council's thinking at this point in time and how much he thinks in the sense of like can't start Hendricks against the Dodgers. Can't, what's his thought process there? I'm curious how he thinks and how he's mapping out like a road to contention if there is one.
We're looking for real ways to boost our nutrition and just found a protein shake that actually tastes amazing. It's called Orgain, and it's been a game changer.
Orgain is the leader in real protein-powered nutrition that understands that being good for you doesn't have to taste bad. It's the organic ingredients we're looking for, but I don't want a grainy battle with my taste buds every day. You know what I'm saying? It's giving smooth milkshake vibes. That's Orgain, and they have a brand new 30-gram complete protein shake that offers protein-packed real nutrition designed to satisfy your cravings without all the sugar.
It gives me energy, provides muscle support, and helps manage hunger too. It's also made without soy ingredients and made with no artificial flavors or sweeteners.
Orgain 30-gram protein shakes are available at Costco and Orgain.com. If you want to get in on the delicious protein-packed nutrition today, head to Orgain.com/FOUL and use the code FOUL for 20% off your order. Once again, that's Orgain.com/FOUL for 20% off. And make sure you use promo code FOUL so they know FT sent you.
The Cubs have Wicks, Assad, and Tyone lined up for the Yankees. And as you were talking, Sahadev, it just kind of hit me like, have the Cubs really like clicked on all cylinders at all this year, even at the same time? Right. April, it was kind of sloppy. The defense wasn't there. They have shown flashes, but it goes back to something it was probably something Theo, I think, said one time in frustration, like win a game 9-8, like something like, like you can, it doesn't have to be like this perfect, orderly, like 5-2 win every game. Like they're going to need the offense to step up. And we alluded to it after the no-hitter. It's like two guys almost hit for the cycle, and we barely mention it. And those guys are at the bottom, towards the bottom of the lineup. Pretty impressive. When your starter gives you 7 scoreless, you should win the game. I mean, they didn't in Tyone's start against Pirates, and that was Lopez. I think that was Lopez, right? Giving up the 3-run homer, go-ahead homer. So it's like things haven't lined up for the Cubs, but that's, to me, a big part, I think, of baseball in 2024, right? I mean, there haven't been like that many teams just kind of boat racing it, to use a term that was in Tyler Kepner's great story on The Athletic of like the clubhouse lingo and how to use it in your everyday life. Like the Yankees, great start, some like great probable Hall of Fame talent, just like really carrying them. And the Cubs don't have that, are not in that they don't have a player within that stratosphere, but the Cubs have clearly have had enough kind of resourcefulness to just like keep hanging in there. And that's always, important. And I think we'll have a really interesting reminder of what the Cubs were this weekend when our guy Anthony Rizzo returns to Wrigley Field.
Yeah, it's not the return of Efros and Leiter; it's the return of Anthony Rizzo.
You may actually go find Efros and Leiter.
Absolutely,
Like the entire pack will be around Rizzo, and you'll be asking Efros about his sidearm, and then just you don't talk to Leiter as much as he sort of like gives you dissertations on the state of baseball, right?
Exactly. Yes, those two situations will absolutely occur over the weekend. But Rizzo is the main attraction, and Rizzo. I mean, he was the face of the Cubs through a rebuild and then a championship era, the peak of Cubs baseball. Everyone's that's still alive. He was there and he was the face of it. Whether it was there are two moments that stand out to me. I guess there's more than that. There's was it the end of 18 or 19 when he hurt his ankle really badly? Do you remember that?
Yes.
I
believe it was kind of that 19 end of the era.
Okay, so it was right before, and they were playing good baseball. He got hurt, and then it like they were still that he still played. Like it looked like, oh, he's done. Like he's missing the rest of the season type injury, and he played through it. Kind of like had some big hits while playing through that. The bloop single against the Nats is always a fun one for me. The respect me. That was I love that one. I know this was like in a brutal season in the end, but the back to capacity 2021, that home run he hit against the Cardinals, it was just so loud, and it was so nice to be a part of during a difficult time. And beyond baseball, everyone was just like, oh, we can do this again. We can go to baseball games and things like that. And to hear the crowd go crazy, like if I'm remembering correctly, it was a really long at bat that he had. The crowd is going crazy, and then he homers against the Cardinals, and the Cubs were still in it at that point. This was before, if you remember that season, they threw a combined no-hitter against the Dodgers, then lost, I think, 11 or 12 in a row.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So that, they were still in it at that point, and it was really fun and exciting. And it was probably the peak of that season, better than the combined no-hitter in my opinion. That moment was like, I just remember being there and feeling the energy, and it felt like the playoffs. And Rizzo, as great as, the World Series and the 3 NLCS runs were, it just like that's what stands out to me about Rizzo. And then all the goofiness in post games that we've had over the years, and just like, the debate, is he a leader, is he not? I always thought, whatever that means, he was fun to cover.
Oh, for sure. I think that's kind of what I think of too, just that smirk he had on his face, standing at his locker, just how he liked to kind of dish it out, the back and forth. Also, just how young he was when he first got here. I mean, to really see him kind of grow up in this city. He was here so long and was at that point of his life where he like genuinely had like a network of friends in Chicago. Like he had this whole life set up here, and that was why it was so hard to leave in the middle of the 2021 season. But just, whether it was his crew here, his family visiting him, all the time. Maybe not all the time, but certainly he's from a really tight-knit Italian-American family from South Florida. Prior to that, the New York metropolitan area. And they loved coming out here. I always remember when Rizzo got traded, of just hearing amongst the Wrigley staff of like Anthony's parents thanking them just for kind of taking care of him over the years. That kind of group, that would be near the 1914 club or whatever. And, the leader thing is kind of interesting. He led in his own way. And I always thought that was more interesting than this, like, is he some sort of like speech maker or like guy who'd run through whatever cliche you'd want to think of for like a leader.
Right.
Like he was his own guy. And so like to use a Joe Madden term, he definitely vibrated on Madden's frequency. Like Rizzo was not the first guy to get to the ballpark. He was not the last one to leave, but like he knew exactly what he needed to do to get ready. Sometimes he'd like work out in the morning with Tim Buss, the old strength coach. Like he just found this routine and comfort zone here. And like he performed in between the lines, just nonstop. Like when the lights went on, he just loved the competition. And, I don't know if you always find that with every single player, but he was just like ferociously intense, as soon as the game started, and then could really be sort of goofy, kind of like that man child, like an overgrown kid at times, just with the enthusiasm he had. And I guess the final piece too, part of why he had this healthy outlook was because of the health scare he had as a Red Sox prospect. Beating cancer certainly widened his perspective. And I think, his ultimate legacy will have to, within Chicago, we'll have to mention what he did at Laurie's Children's Hospital. I mean, there are kids now who are, growing up, whatever grade they're in now, but they're, kids and families who met Anthony Rizzo on off days or, off-season trips where he'd pop in there. He was someone who like knew the hospital workers there. He poured a ton of money into that. And, that his charity was definitely not an eyewash type thing. Eyewash.
Right. Absolutely.
That would definitely be a term that Rizzo liked to use, like not eyewash at all. Someone who was very, invested and engaged and just present. And so that's why that we saw Javi come back recently, and that Javi was not playing well. He's not on a particularly good or glamorous team. It was a weeknight game at Wrigley. I think Friday 1:20, Rizzo in a Yankees uniform with the New York and Chicago media kind of swarming him. His first time back since 21. I'd imagine he's been back to Chicago, since then. But to actually walk into the stadium as an opposing player and play against the Cubs, I think that's something that will immediately go viral. That's something that Rizzo and Cubs players love, right? That Friday 1:20 window, no one else is playing, and that game is going to be on in other clubhouses as players around the league get ready on Friday.
Yeah, you can almost like envision a moment for Rizzo, like he's gonna do something, right? Like,
of course,
right? That's like it feels inevitable. There's one other thing that I remember about Rizzo, and it has to do with something you wrote. I just remember a piece you wrote. I believe it was after the 2013 season. I mean, it was about after the 2013 season, but I think you wrote it must have been after 14. That was really his breakout season, just like one of his best offensive seasons, and just how he was challenged by why am I blanking on by Mike Borzello after the 2013 season, kind of saying like, how good do you want to be, and that kind of like pushed Rizzo to make the changes to his stance and his mechanics and everything to like get him from like a good offensive player to pretty great one for about 6-7 years right there, where he was one of the best offensive first basemen in all of baseball. I mean, I shouldn't just say offensive, all around first baseman in all of baseball. I remember reading that piece and just being like, this is really insightful and interesting stuff. But I mean, it was also it's just I love stories about guys that are good, but like, I can be better, I can be great, and being willing to make those changes. And Rizzo was one of those guys who took his game to another level and honestly broke through that kind of ceiling that scouts had for him. He was supposed to be, like a good player, maybe make an all-star game someday, but he pushed himself to another level of success.
Yeah, if I remember it correctly, I'd forgotten that story, but I think it was something along the lines of towards the end of one of those bad Dale Swaim seasons, maybe even after the last game, and they're flying home from wherever, St. Louis. Rizzo kind of approaches Mike Borzello, who's the Cubs' kind of game planning czar for a long time, someone who's widely respected, who has a long career with the Yankees, one ring as a member of their staff. And basically, like, Rizzo sort of, wasn't observing and kind of curious. And he basically, if I remember correctly, went up to Borzello on the plane. He's like, all right, like, how would you get me out? Like, what do you got? Like, help me see my game from that, game planning perspective of how people get me out. And there was that edge to Rizzo to want to be great. I remember, I think it was you go over to Joey Votto once, kind of around that time too, and Votto ended up talking to you for like 20-25 minutes. Rizzo, which is obviously a great idea and a well executed story to get people are really good at explaining the game to talk about their peers, and that stuck with me. And I think that you need things like that to happen, like, to win a World Series, to break a century and counting curse. You need to get things right, because Rizzo was kind of a question mark coming out of San Diego, and that was, one of Jed Hoyer's best trades. I mean, he gives up Adrian Gonzalez, and Rizzo was not the headliner prospect, I'd say. Like, he was a good, solid prospect, but I believe it was Casey Kelly, maybe. It was probably like the bigger name.
I was trying to think. Yeah, Casey Kelly was
pitcher,
a pitching prospect.
And then he really, they put all this pressure on him in San Diego, which it's San Diego, right? There couldn't have been that much pressure, but there was a lot of expectations, and he didn't handle it well. And I think the thread throughout baseball is, what's interesting is, Jed referenced Rizzo's struggles in San Diego when he talked to Pete Crow Armstrong after his really rough major league debut. We've seen what PC done now, but the Cubs trading for Rizzo is just one of those, like, all-time franchise moves, like 2016, and everything around that doesn't happen without Rizzo. There are a lot of people that go into something like that, but he certainly was at the forefront, was there kind of on the ground floor of the rebuild. And, there are definitely things, we've learned this the more we cover the game, of they're just things you can't measure. And there's just something about Rizzo, this like charisma, this love for the spotlight. He wanted to be the man. I think there are different ways to go about that. He wasn't like an MVP winner. He's not a future Hall of Famer, but like, how many people have had a better career than Anthony Rizzo? You know what I'm saying? I'm just like, whenever this ends for him, and it's been a rougher stretch this year. I mean, just talk about a guy who's like, gotten everything he could out of this game, and has left, just a ton of people happy for what he accomplished in Chicago.
Yeah, I think this will be the of all the returns we've gone through over the past 3 years, years, this will be the most interesting one to watch. I think they've all been really nice receptions, but this is the one I'm most interested in. Rizzo was the face of that team. I believe you had a headline with the Mr. Cub 2.0 or something.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? So this matters. This is a big deal. I'm sure it's a big deal for Rizzo and his family. And it matters a lot to the fans. So I'm looking forward to seeing the reception, seeing what he does in his return to Wrigley. Obviously, 3 really important games too for the Cubs. They need to win. There's not series losses can't happen. A sweep may be needed, right? It's going to be really hard, but that may be ultimately what they need to kind of get people, at least to get people on the outside looking in to like believe that they have that outside chance still, hold on to that hope. So 3 big games this weekend, Patrick. I'll be there for all 3. We will be covering this. You'll be out in the West Coast next week. We'll be back with more episodes next week. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Northside Territory. Subscribe on the YouTube page and subscribe to The Athletic, where we'll be covering you all season and into the winter. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Take care.